She was the new kid in the dirt. Fresh uniform, clean boots, no scars. Yet, they called her the rookie, not out of spite, but because that's what she was, unproven. In a squad of war-weary veterans, Private First Class Eliza Moreno was a question mark. She didn't talk much, just watched, listened, trained. They kept their distance. No one hated her. They just didn't trust her. Not yet. But war has a way of speeding things up. When the heat hit, and everything fell apart in that narrow valley, she didn't freeze. She carried 3 men out of the fire, and never looked back. It started with dust. Heat shimmered over the tarmac as Eliza Moreno stepped off the C-130 and into the stifling air of Forward Operating Base Razor, her first deployment, Afghanistan. Nestled against a chain of jagged hills, the base looked less like a fortress, and more like a collection of sandbags barely holding out the world. She kept her head down, M4 tight to her chest. A few soldiers glanced her way, some with curiosity, most with indifference. No welcome party, just the whine of generators and the steady thump of rotor blades overhead. "Moreno?" a voice barked. She turned. Sergeant Briggs stood a few feet away, eyes hidden behind dark lenses, jaw like it had been carved from gravel. "Yes, Sergeant," she said. He looked her up and down, then turned away. "You're late. Let's go." That was her welcome. Her new squad was called Reaper Team. 6 men, 1 woman, and now her. They'd all been in country for months. Some were on their 2nd or 3rd tours. They moved like a unit, talked in clipped phrases she didn't yet understand. She tried to blend in, ate alone, slept light. No one was cruel, but no one made room for her either. "Watch the rookie," someone muttered before their first patrol. The convoy rolled out into the valley, armor glinting under the sun. It wasn't long before the world exploded. A deafening crack. Dirt and fire erupted beneath the second Humvee. An IED. The shockwave slapped her lungs flat. She hit the ground, ears ringing. Training kicked in. Late. But it came. She crawled toward the wreck, heart slamming in her chest. Someone was screaming. Someone else wasn't moving. She hesitated for a breath too long. "Move, goddammit!" Briggs shouted. She ran. She helped drag Private Haskins out of the fire, wrapped his leg, tied a tourniquet. She didn't think. Just worked. The medevac came fast. Dust and blood in the rotor wash. Back at base, no one said much. But someone left an extra bottle of water on her bunk. NTHE next mission was rougher. Dead Man's Ridge. They were walking this time. On foot patrol through terrain that looked like it wanted to eat them alive. Sun-baked rocks. Blind corners. Shadows that moved wrong. Then the first shot cracked. Sniper. They hit the dirt. Private Quan was down, bleeding from the shoulder. "Contact northeast!" someone yelled. Bullets buzzed past. Eliza didn't freeze this time. She crawled to Quan, grabbed his plate carrier, and dragged him behind a rock outcrop. Fire above her head. She tied the bandage with shaking hands, then rolled to the side and laid down suppressive fire. She wasn't thinking about fear anymore. Later, as they regrouped, Corporal Rodriguez gave her a nod. "Not bad, rookie." It was the first thing anyone had said to her all day. That night, in the chow hall, she sat with the squad for the first time. No one told her to leave. But Briggs didn't speak. Another day, another mission. This one was different. Night Op Intel said insurgents were moving weapons through a nearby canyon. They were to intercept and disable the supply line. She volunteered for point. It got quiet after that. They moved under moonlight, NVGs humming green. Terrain was tight. Every footstep echoed too loud. She scanned ahead, breathing steady. "Contact left!" someone hissed. Shots. Short burst. 2 insurgents down. They pushed forward. Eliza spotted movement and radioed coordinates. Grid 29er, Alpha 75. Fire mission over. Artillery cracked in the distance. The canyon lit up like lightning. It worked. When they exfilled, there was blood on her sleeve. Not hers. Quan again. Shrapnel to the leg. They made it back, but Briggs pulled her aside. "You're too eager," he said. "This isn't a video game." She didn't answer. He walked away. Then came the waiting. Days blurred into each other. Checkpoints. Tension. Rumors of an ambush brewing somewhere south of the valley. Rodriguez and Malik were playing cards when she walked into the barracks. They motioned her over. "You always this quiet?" Malik asked. She shrugged. "Lost my brother," she said finally. "Marine, Fallujah." They nodded. No more questions needed. "I get it," Rodriguez said. "That's why I'm here too." Something passed between them then. Not quite friendship, but something better. Recognition. A week later, they got the call. High-risk mission. Village close to the border. Suspected Taliban control. An informant needed extraction. Weather was turning bad. They'd only have a few hours. No one trusted the intel. But orders were orders. They moved in fast. Trucks kicking up dirt, helmets tight, adrenaline burning. The village was too quiet. Then it exploded. Gunfire from every window. RPG hit the lead truck. Flames. Screams. They were pinned. Eliza was thrown into a wall, ears ringing. She got up. Saw Rodriguez crawling, blood pouring from his leg. Malik was shouting, trying to drag another man. Simmons, maybe. She didn't think. Just moved. She pulled Rodriguez behind cover, then ran back for Malik. Then she saw Briggs, unmoving, crumpled near the burning truck. "Leave him!" someone yelled. She didn't. She went back a third time, smoke thick, gunfire cracking past her head. She grabbed Briggs by the vest and dragged, one foot, then another. Her arm was bleeding. She didn't stop. By the time she got them to cover, she could barely stand. She still set up the defense, 2 clips left, 3 wounded men behind her. She posted up behind a burned-out wall and fired in bursts. 1, 2, 5 rounds. Reload. Keep them back. She used her last smoke to buy time. And somehow, it worked. At dawn, the choppers came. She fired one final shot before collapsing next to Briggs. He didn't wake up until they were airborne. When he did, he stared at her, silent. Rodriguez smiled weakly. "Guess the rookie saved our asses." She said nothing, just closed her eyes and let the cold wind hit her face. They called her the rookie because she was new, untested, green, in a world that didn't forgive mistakes. But war strips you down to your core. It doesn't care who you were before, only who you are when the bullets start flying. Eliza Moreno didn't ask to be a hero. She didn't carry 3 men out of that fire for medals or glory. She did it because it was the right thing to do, because no one else could. Back at Forward Operating Base Razor, the air smelled of diesel and dust, but the mood was different. The squad was quieter than usual, carrying the weight of what had happened. Sergeant Briggs, once the hardest man in the unit, sat across from Eliza in the mess hall, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "You earned this, Moreno." The Army Commendation Medal sat heavy in her hands when it was pinned to her chest. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was proof that the squad had seen her, truly seen her, not as the rookie, but as a soldier. Rodriguez clapped her on the back. Malik grinned, and even Briggs offered a nod of respect. But medals and praise were not what stayed with her. It was the knowledge that when the world burned around them, she was the one who carried her brothers out of the fire. That night replayed endlessly in her mind. The roar of explosions, the sting of smoke, the feel of blood on her skin. It wasn't something you forgot. Days later, as a new soldier arrived at the base, nervous and wide-eyed, Eliza found herself in a different position. She wasn't the rookie anymore. She was the one who showed up early, drilled the newcomers, told them the hard truths no one wanted to admit. The weight of responsibility had shifted, and she carried it with quiet strength. In the mess hall, a soldier joked about the rookie who saved 3 men and survived the Valley of Ash. Eliza smiled, but it was a different kind of smile now. One shaped by fire, by loss, by the unbreakable bond forged in combat. NSHE knew the war would keep coming, and so would the new soldiers. The names, the faces, the stories, they all blurred into one constant truth. Out here, you either fight or you don't come home. And if you asked the men she saved who she was now, they wouldn't call her a rookie anymore. They'd call her a soldier. The night swallowed the valley like a living thing, thick and heavy. The squad moved silently under the ghostly glow of their night vision goggles, every breath measured, every step careful. The canyon ahead was a narrow squeeze of rock walls, tight and unforgiving. Intelligence had come in fast and sharp. Insurgents were moving weapons through here. The mission was clear: intercept, disrupt, and return. Eliza volunteered for point position without hesitation, surprising everyone. It was risky. Leading the way through enemy territory meant exposing herself first, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't the rookie anymore. Not tonight. Her boots crunched softly on loose gravel as she scanned the shadows ahead. The green tint of her NVGs showed shapes that flickered and shifted in the darkness. Her heart pounded, steady but loud enough that she could feel it in her throat. "Contact left," whispered Malik suddenly. Bullets tore through the quiet, slamming into rock and dirt. Eliza dropped to one knee, pulling her weapon up and returning fire instinctively. 2 insurgents went down, their bodies slumping against the jagged canyon wall. The squad pressed forward, every member holding their breath and their trigger fingers tight. Eliza's eyes flicked to a movement, subtle but deadly. She radioed in coordinates crisply. "Grid, 29er Alpha 75, fire mission requested. Over." Seconds later, distant artillery thundered through the night, bursts of light blooming against the rocky walls like thunderclaps. The insurgents scattered, disoriented. They moved fast after that, pushing through the chaos. But the mission's cost became clear when Malik called out sharply, "Kwan's hit." Eliza rushed over to Private Kwan, who clutched his shoulder, blood soaking through his sleeve. She pressed her hands to the wound, applying pressure as she had been trained, but the pain in his eyes was worse than the injury. Briggs came over, his voice low but sharp. "Moreno, get your head in the game. One mistake out here, and it's over." Eliza didn't respond. She didn't have time. She tied off a tourniquet, checked Kwan's pulse, and helped him back to cover. The adrenaline was a hard shield, but doubt gnawed at her. She wasn't perfect. Not yet. By the time they returned to base, the squad's opinion of her had shifted, though Briggs was still hard to read. He pulled her aside. "You're too eager," he said, his tone carrying the weight of experience. "War isn't a video game. You can't fix everything with quick reflexes." Eliza nodded, absorbing the critique. But she didn't let it break her. She wanted to learn, to get better, to prove that she belonged. That night, in the dim light of her bunk, she replayed the mission in her mind. The flashes of gunfire, the rush of adrenaline, the weight of responsibility. She wasn't the rookie anymore. She was becoming something else, a soldier forged by fire, mistakes, and the will to survive. The barracks were quieter that night. The hum of the air conditioning was a faint backdrop to the soft shuffle of boots and the clink of gear being set down. Eliza sat on her bunk, eyes fixed on the fading light slipping through the narrow window. It had been weeks since the fire, since the chaos that had carved its way into her bones. The dust still clung to her skin, but now something heavier weighed on her heart. Rodriguez and Malik found her there, sitting alone as usual. Rodriguez, with his easy grin that never quite reached his eyes, pulled a deck of worn playing cards from his pocket. Malik, steady and calm, leaned against the doorframe. "You always this quiet?" Malik asked, his voice low but warm. Eliza shook her head, barely looking up. "I guess I'm just used to it." Rodriguez shuffled the cards with practiced fingers and sat beside her. "Doesn't seem like the kind of quiet that's earned," he said softly. "More like the kind that's given." She looked at him then. The flicker of pain in his eyes made her think of the things they all carried but rarely spoke aloud. "I lost my brother," she said after a pause. "Marine." "Iraq." "Fallujah." Malik nodded, the crease between his eyebrows deepening. "I get it. Everyone here's got a story like that. Some of us just don't tell it as loud. Rodriguez tossed a card onto the blanket. I joined to get out of the neighborhood. Got tired of the fights, the cops, the dead ends. Now I'm fighting a different kind of war. Guess it doesn't matter where you start, just where you're headed. Eliza let the words settle. She could feel the weight of their honesty pressing against her own doubts and fears. The war had changed them all. It shaped their shadows, etched their faces, and stole pieces of their innocence. But it also forged something stronger, brotherhood, or maybe something like it. "Why do you stay?" she asked quietly. "When it gets this bad?" Malik looked out the window toward the darkening sky. "Because sometimes, you have to be the reason someone else gets to go home." Rodriguez smiled, a sad curve of lips. "You're not just the rookie anymore, Eliza. You're one of us." She swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of relief and pressure. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about belonging. About standing shoulder to shoulder with these men who had seen too much and survived it anyway. That night, they talked more about the families waiting back home, the dreams deferred, the moments they missed. They shared laughter and silence, memories and regrets. For the first time, Eliza felt the walls she'd built around herself begin to crack. When the morning came, the sun casting a pale glow over the base, Eliza knew something had shifted. The war was still waiting. The danger was still real, but so was this newfound strength inside her. A strength born not just from training or instinct, but from the unspoken bond of brothers in arms. She wasn't just a soldier fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for them, for the ones who trusted her, who depended on her, for the family she'd chosen in the middle of a foreign land, far from home. And that made all the difference. The call came in just as the sun dipped below the horizon, bleeding orange into the dusty sky. An informant had been located, a valuable asset caught deep in enemy territory, close to the border. The mission was urgent and dangerous. The village was a known Taliban stronghold. Time was short, and the weather was turning sour. The squad scrambled, loading gear with practiced efficiency. Eliza felt the familiar tight knot of adrenaline coil in her stomach, a mix of fear and determination. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd been waiting for. The moment to prove she wasn't just the rookie. The convoy rumbled out, engines churning up clouds of dirt that swallowed the trucks whole. As they neared the village, the silence thickened, too thick, the kind of quiet that screamed danger. Then everything exploded. RPG fire hit the lead truck, flames licking up metal and glass. Bullets tore through the air, shattering windows and cutting through the night like angry ghosts. The convoy scattered, chaos swallowing them whole. Eliza slammed into a cracked wall, ears ringing and vision swimming. Her training kicked in, steadying her hands, sharpening her senses. She spotted Rodriguez crawling, blood dripping from his leg, his face a mask of grit and pain. "Rodriguez!" she called out, dropping to her knees beside him. She pressed a hand to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but the gunfire was relentless, like a storm with no end. Malik was shouting, dragging another man, Simmons, away from the burning truck. Eliza's eyes flicked to Briggs, unmoving, crumpled in the dirt. The squad was pinned, trapped in a nightmare they'd fought to avoid. "Leave him," someone yelled, but Eliza shook her head fiercely. She wasn't about to abandon the sergeant who'd pushed her to be better. She darted back, weaving through the hail of bullets and smoke. Her arms stung where shrapnel had grazed her, but she ignored it. Grabbing Briggs by his vest, she hauled him to safety. One step, then another, heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. Behind her, the fire burned hotter. The acrid smell of burning fuel filled the air, choking and thick. NSHE collapsed beside Rodriguez, her breath ragged, muscles screaming from exertion. 3 men were wounded, the enemy closing in. Her hands shook as she loaded magazines, setting up a defensive position behind a burned-out wall. The world narrowed to the sound of gunfire, the smell of smoke, and the pounding of her own heart. She fired in bursts, keeping the attackers at bay. 5 rounds, then reload. One clip after another. Her arms burned, but she didn't stop. She lit a smoke grenade, the thick cloud drifting out like a shield. Somehow, it worked. The enemy hesitated, confused by the sudden wall of smoke. It bought them precious minutes. Then, above the roar of battle, she heard it, the distant thump of helicopter rotors. The medevac was here. Eliza fired one last shot before collapsing next to Briggs, her body spent, breath shallow. NHE opened his eyes, staring at her in disbelief. Rodriguez smiled weakly, blood streaked down his face. "Guess the rookie saved our asses," he said. Eliza didn't answer. She closed her eyes, letting the cool night air wash over her, knowing that in this fire she had found who she was meant to be. The base was quieter now, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, full of things unsaid and memories too raw to speak aloud. Eliza sat in the med tent, the sterile smell mingling with the faint scent of antiseptic. Her arm throbbed where the shrapnel had grazed her, but that was the least of what hurt. Briggs was awake, but the lines on his face told a story no metal could fix. He gave her a nod when their eyes met, a quiet acknowledgement of what they'd survived together. Rodriguez and Malik gathered around, their faces tired but relieved. The squad had lost more than just their sense of safety that day. They'd lost something they'd never get back. Eliza stared out the tent flap at the dusty horizon, sunlight turning the sky a soft pink. The war wasn't over. It wasn't even close. But she knew she'd never be the rookie again. She had carried them through fire and bullets. She had become a soldier. The days that followed were a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and quiet moments stolen between missions. Eliza found herself sitting with the men, sharing stories of home, of what they missed most. Simple things like a warm meal or a cold drink. A laugh that wasn't forced. They were more than a squad now. They were a family forged in battle, held together by trust and sacrifice. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Eliza stood watch on the perimeter. The wind carried the distant sounds of the valley, the hum of life continuing despite everything. She thought of her brother, of the promise she'd made to herself when she first put on the uniform. To be more than just the rookie. To be someone who carried others through the fire. And she had. The war would go on, and so would she. Stronger, steadier, ready. Because now she was no longer the new kid in the dirt. She was a soldier. The morning sun poured into the base's parade ground, casting long shadows across the assembled soldiers. The air was thick with anticipation, a mixture of pride and solemn respect. Eliza stood in formation, her uniform crisp despite the dust and sweat from weeks in the field. The weight of the Army Commendation Medal in her pocket felt heavier than any pack she'd carried. Sergeant Briggs stepped forward, his eyes scanning the faces before him until they settled on hers. He cleared his throat, voice steady but carrying the weight of what had been endured. Today we recognize one of our own, not for being the newest, not for being the youngest, but for showing what it means to be a soldier. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest as the medal was pinned to her uniform. It wasn't just metal, it was proof. Proof that the men she had saved, the battles she had fought, mattered, that she had earned her place. Rodriguez clapped her on the shoulder. Malik smiled wide, and even the toughest men in the unit looked at her with something new, respect. But Eliza knew this was more than recognition. It was a promise to herself, a promise that she would carry that strength forward, through every mission, every danger, every fire. When the ceremony ended, she stood with her squad, watching the sun climb higher, lighting the way ahead. The road was still long, and the war far from over. But for the first time, Eliza felt something undeniable. She belonged, no longer the rookie, no longer just a soldier in training. She was one of them, battle-tested, forged by fire, and ready for whatever came next. The months that followed carried Eliza far from the fires she had walked through, but not from the memories that stayed etched deep in her mind. The war zone had shaped her, carved out a new version of herself that couldn't be undone. She found herself back on base watching fresh recruits arrive, wide-eyed, eager, and uncertain. One afternoon, as she stood at attention during a briefing, a young soldier caught her eye. He reminded her of herself, new, nervous, burdened by the weight of expectations. Without thinking, she stepped forward, offering a steady hand and a firm voice. "You're not alone out here," she said quietly. "We all start as rookies." That moment changed everything. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a mentor, a guide, a living reminder that even in the darkest battles, strength could be found in those willing to rise. Eliza thought of the 3 men she had carried out of the fire, of the lives she had touched and the family she had found in the chaos. Their stories intertwined with hers, a legacy of courage born from fear. She understood now that being called the Rookie was never a weakness. It was the beginning of something greater, a journey from doubt to bravery, from silence to strength. As the sun set behind the mountains, Eliza stood tall, ready for whatever came next. Because her story was no longer just hers alone. It belonged to every soldier who fought, who survived, who carried each other through the fire. And that legacy would never fade. The morning air was crisp and sharp as Eliza stood at the edge of the base, watching the horizon glow with the first light of dawn. The war had taken much from her: friends, innocence, certainty. But it had also given her something she hadn't expected: purpose. She had fought to survive, to protect, and now she was ready to build something new. The medal pinned to her chest was more than recognition. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the worst fires, something strong could be forged. Eliza's thoughts drifted to home, the quiet streets she had left behind, the family she longed to see again. She knew returning wouldn't be easy. The world outside the battlefield moved differently, and she would carry scars that no one could see. But she was ready. Ready to face those challenges with the same courage that had carried her through the firefight, the smoke, and the fear. She had learned that being a soldier wasn't just about combat, it was about heart, resilience, and the will to keep moving forward. As new recruits marched past, eager and uncertain, Eliza smiled quietly to herself. The rookie she once was gone, replaced by someone who had faced fire and come out stronger. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer defined by fear or doubt. She was defined by strength, by the lives she had saved, and the legacy she was building with every step. And as the sun rose higher, casting light over the base, Eliza took a deep breath and stepped forward into whatever came next.